everyone, my name is Laura. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not, welcome back. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how I do propagations in sphagnum moss. I have two different philodendron that I'll be propagating in sphagnum moss today. The first is this cute little Florida green that I got from my planty friend Hazel. If you're watching this, Hazel, thank you. Very sweet of her. She gifted me this cutting because she knew I'd been looking for one, and it has a little baby growth point already, but no roots. So this is a really great candidate for sphagnum moss propagation. I'll show you how I set that up. And then the next cutting that I will be rooting in sphagnum moss for you today is a tiny bipennifolium. I know it doesn't look like a bipennifolium. It's a really little one that has a bunch of aerial roots that started like rooting into the soil. This is a cutting from my mother plant. And I feel like this is a good one that we can just stick in some sphagnum moss and watch the roots continue to grow, because they're already, like as you can see here, this was the aerial root. And then over here, it just like started growing into the soil. So this is gonna be a good one to stick into sphagnum moss because it'll take off really quickly. So the first thing we're gonna need is some sphagnum moss, and really any sphagnum moss will do. This is what I have with me right now. It's the long fibered sphagnum moss, and I just picked this up at my local reptile store because I have some reptiles and I went in for supplies and I saw this and I was like, perfect. I could use some. So that's where I got mine, but I know you can find it online. You can find it at like Walmart or Home Depot or wherever really that you get any plant supplies. They usually have sphagnum moss. Not super hard to find and honestly pretty inexpensive. And again, you can use any type of sphagnum moss, it doesn't really matter. So I just filled this bowl with water and I'm going to add my sphagnum moss to let it hydrate. And honestly, I don't know how much I'm gonna need, so I'm just gonna rehydrate a bunch. So I'll just add it into this water and let it soak for a little bit. Now I'm just making sure that all of it is submerged in water so it all gets an opportunity to soak. I think I'm going to add a little bit more because I do have 2 propagation vessels to fill, so I think I'm going to need more than this. Okay, so I'm just going to let this sit here for about 15 minutes while it rehydrates and gets about evenly moist all over. And the way that I like it is so that it has enough water that when you squeeze it, it doesn't like drip, but when you feel it, it's still wet. Like, that's not dripping when I squeeze it. I guess it did a little bit, but that's kind of how moist I like it to be. I don't like my sphagnum moss for propagations to be super wet because that can cause root rot like anything. So we'll just let that sit there for a few minutes. This has been sitting for about 10 or 15 minutes now, and again, I like it to be like wet enough that it feels like, well, wet to the touch, but that when you squeeze it, water doesn't just like come rushing out. A couple of drops here and there is fine. But that is the perfect level of moisture for sphagnum moss. And next I'm going to take my containers, and the way that I fill them is I stick the plant in there without any sphagnum and I see how low either the stem or the aerial roots are, and I'll fill about to there. And then I will add my plant and I will slowly and carefully add more sphagnum on top. So what I've been doing is I've been adding sphagnum moss on top of the cutting, just enough to kind of cover the roots that have already been growing and to cover that whole section of the plant that should be covered, like where the node is. But also as I'm adding it, I'm being very gentle because I still want there to be like a lot of airflow. So I don't want it to be like compressed in there, so I'm not packing it in. I'm just kind of tapping it in to the little gaps, and I'm pretty sure that this is gonna be good. So this is what that looks like. The glare is kind of terrible, sorry about that. But you can see there's my node. My leaf I do not want sitting in the sphagnum, so my leaf is not touching sphagnum anywhere. And all my aerial roots and my node are surrounded by sphagnum, and there are still pockets where air can get in. It's not packed in there, and that's good to go. Now we'll move on to the next one. The next one is my Florida green, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to add sphagnum moss to about where the node will sit in there. And you can use any jars for this. I either use like old jars that had like pasta sauce or something, or I buy my jars if I don't have any at home, just at the thrift store. They're super inexpensive. But I'm a jar collector, so any jar that enters my home, I form a bond with and I never get rid of. So I always have a ton of jars for this. And I've never had issues with growth points being like stuck in the sphagnum. They always manage to poke through. I have a lot of plants that I've done this way, especially a lot of philodendron. I think all my philodendron I root this way. So this is about as far as I'm putting my node. And now I'm going to very gently add more moss on top, just enough to cover the node. And this one had some little baby aerial roots, but nothing like the last one I just potted up, so I don't have to add a ton of sphagnum in there. I don't have to worry too much about it. But just enough so that the node is covered. And it's just lightly set in there. Again, not good to pack it in there. And that's what that'll look like. So there is my Florida green. And my bipennifolium. And I'm going to set these under my grow light, and I will keep you updated on how these grow, either in my Instagram stories or I'll make a future video. Just keep an eye out either on Instagram or here, and I will let you know how these are growing. So that is it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know down below. I'll answer all your questions in the comments. I know this was kind of a brief video, but I just wanted to get something out there since I was going to be sticking both of these plants in sphagnum moss today. But I'd be happy to hear your experiences rooting a sphagnum moss, or if you have any other method of rooting plants that you prefer, let me know down below. This is my preference at the moment. This I have found a ton of success in, especially with philodendron. But if you have any tips or any other types of rooting substrates that you really like, let me know down below and maybe I'll give them a try and make a video comparing all of them. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up or give me a thumbs down if you didn't. Lets me know what kind of content to make for you, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!